And that's one of my biggest passions with my career is interacting with people who have never seen the ocean and giving them that passion to want to protect it. Because whether or not they've seen it, it still affects their day-to-day life, even if they don't realize it.
Off-Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. Undeterred by world events, Danielle Dillman pursued her goal of becoming a certified diver. Starting as a dive tender at a local aquarium, she was introduced to the possibilities of the underwater world. Currently employed at the Georgia Aquarium, I get a chance to chat with her about some of the controversies surrounding aquarium diving and the importance of the research and conservation efforts conducted by aquariums. Women in ocean science, accreditation process of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, marine research, aquaculture, and much more. Please enjoy. Danielle, how are you doing? It's this evening for you, correct?
That is correct. It is about 7:30 East Coast.
Oh, okay. Where are you based again?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, okay. I have actually not been to Georgia. I used to live on the East Coast, but the Northeast, way far up north. Yeah, so I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that area. And I know there's the big aquarium there. So when I used to be based in Texas, there was a dive shop, and they would do trips out there. I think a lot of dive shops will do trips out there to go dive with the whale shark in there. I'm excited to hear more about your journey as a diver and everything. But thank you for joining the podcast today. I really, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I thought it would be a cool opportunity to kind of talk about what I get to do in diving, since it's different than what majority of divers do when they go down certain tracks. Okay. Well, I guess let me throw out my first question for you. Tell me how and why you became a scuba diver. Tell me about that first breath. What led up to that moment? Was it, I absolutely love this? Was it, I absolutely hate this? Was it, this is okay, I think I could do it again? Tell me all about it. So first dive was definitely magical, but there's a lot leading up to it. So I've only been a diver since 2020. I finished my associate's degree in 2019 and knew I wanted to work in the aquarium industry. And at this time I lived in North Carolina, which is about a few states above where I currently am. And I was really interested in seeing how that side of the world worked. I knew I wanted to work in marine science, so I started at a small aquarium local to that area, and they had a dive team, and they were looking for somebody that would be willing to dive tend. So I'd be outside of the exhibit, doing hand signals with the divers, making sure animals aren't getting too close, doing air checks, all those sorts of things. And then I would go upstairs and I would help get all their equipment off. I would wash the equipment, I would take it apart. And I knew in that moment, I was like, well, I want to be the one in the exhibit. I don't want to be the one always outside of the exhibit. So that's how my dive journey kind of started. We had an instructor that lived locally that worked specifically with our staff at that aquarium. So I started doing the classes through SSI in September of 2020, and I was certified in February of 2021. I got certified down in the Springs in Florida, so I technically think it was Ginny Springs that I got certified in, but I did a bunch of cool dives. Of my first dive trip, I had an absolute blast. I remember first time going underwater, just feeling so calm. I never expected to feel so serene. I think everything stopped, and it was just listening to myself and the bubbles coming past my ears, and that was it. It was awesome. I just loved it, and I cannot describe that feeling to anybody else until they go down themselves and get to experience it.
Oh, yeah. I love chatting with people about that first experience. That's why I always throw out that first question, right? Like, hey, tell me how, why you became a diver, just because that first moment, especially for me too, was just a magical, amazing moment. Like, I absolutely loved it so much, and I'm just like, man, why isn't everybody in the world trying this? So when you were getting certified, that was kind of the first rumblings of COVID. How was that? I mean, obviously, I've chatted about COVID a bit here and there on the podcast, but and I was actually teaching. So funny enough, I was going through my IDC. It was at the end of 2020, and I was planning, I think, early 21 to do the IE. And obviously COVID happened, so a lot of things changed for a lot of people. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience, just going through, or what was it? It didn't quite hit yet, right? Because, well, February, I'm trying to think, it's all such a blur now, but I'm trying to think, was there anything that was like, hey, this thing might be happening, might slow things down? Do you kind of remember any bit of that, or?
Yeah, so 2020, I think COVID hit technically in March of that year, and then September was when I was getting certified. And it was very odd because obviously we knew the face mask rules. We had different things going on throughout the United States. And it was very interesting doing a scuba class because obviously you're going to be in water, but you don't need to be within 6 feet of people, but you're also supposed to have a dive buddy. So the instruction was quite odd. We were in a YWCA, not a YMCA, and we were all spread apart in a swimming pool. And we basically, like, my dive buddy was at least within 3 feet of me, but it was an awkward distance, and it's someone I didn't know, and in between sessions we would have to put our mask back on, and it was quite odd because you're like, will I forget to take it off when I go underwater? Will I accidentally waterboard myself? Who knows what's gonna happen? But it worked out for the best. But however, when I got officially certified in February, the weekend that I was in Florida, I was technically out of state, my job had a requirement that if you left the state, you had to take a 3-day quarantine, and that wasn't told to me before I had left the state. But luckily, I was with people that I also worked with on that trip, so it worked out for the best. We were able to figure it out, and it didn't affect work too much. But it was quite odd getting certified in a time where no one knew what was going on or what the next thing was with a literal virus and things going around.
Oh yeah, no. I'm trying to think. So it was 2019, and then January 2020 was when it hit. Wow, I like it's literally such a blur. So I just remember moments, but the time frame is all kind of a little bit different because I remember it was like, oh, there's this cruise ship. Something's happening over there. It was in the news. We don't really know what's going on. Oh, this is a little bit more serious than we thought. And I remember at the time I was working at the dive shop in Austin, Texas, and it was like, okay, you're going to go through the IDC, but they canceled all IEs. So you're going to have to wait until, whatever happens. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now we're going into lockdown. All the businesses are closing. Everybody's stuck at home. I will admit there was a lot of drinking that happened during that time. So I know I'm not the only one, but yeah, I just remember it was just kind of a blur. And then when the dive shop opened again, it was very challenging trying to go through that whole process and still teach, keep up with the requirements that were going around. So no, that's awesome that you were still going through and you're like, hey, let's just keep going. Tell me a little bit more about your progression as you move through, or you're in the process of completing your dive master.
Correct. So I just finished my master diver last year.
Okay. Congratulations. Tell me a little bit about the progression going from open water to advanced rescue. I'm assuming there's some specialties in there.
So I originally started diving, as I said, in 2020, got officially certified in 2021. I didn't really do any actual dives for a while. My instructor I was actually good friends with back in North Carolina, so he would invite me out when he was doing different classes, so I just keep pull timed so I could kind of stay on top of my skills. But I didn't really do any dive trips outside of the ones I would go to in February. So every February I'd go down to the springs for a few days, get about 12 dives in, and that'd be what I'd do for the year. In 2022, so I actually work at the Georgia Aquarium. I don't know if I've mentioned that. So that is what I do for a living. I'm a manager in one of the guest services departments. So I'm an assistant manager. I over all the training that they do. So I don't dive at work, but I am adjacent to it to an extent. But I moved in 2021 down to Atlanta, and I was still keeping up with my old dive shop. I went on a trip in 2022, and then I did the whale shark dive at the aquarium, and I was like, why am I not taking diving more seriously? Why am I not doing something that I'm super passionate about, that I super enjoy? So I was looking into something more local that I could do my training with, because obviously it wouldn't be feasible to drive 4 to 6 hours to go with my original dive shop. So I found a local shop here in Atlanta that I really, really liked. And in 2023, I took diving very seriously. So I went and did my specialties. So I did 2 specialties in, I believe it was shark ecology, which is SSI offers. And then it was another ecology program, marine ecology. And I did that to get my specialty diver. And then I did my advanced by August, and I had done my rescue as my 3rd one, and I think it was, I have a lot of specialties now. I think I have like 10 plus, maybe close to 12. So I don't know exactly which ones I did in what order. But around this time, I got really close with a lot of people at my dive shop, and I found out they do a program with our local lake here, Lake Lanier. It's an iconic lake in Georgia, where they actually do free dives, and they give you tanks and weights for free. And you can go out and clean the waterways, but while you're out there, they will also certify you in different things. So you can get certified in night and limited viz, you can do navigation, all of those things. So I did navigation in water that I could only see about a foot in front of me, and I passed. So it was pretty good. I think if someone was like, do you know how to navigate? I can say yes. My dive buddy, she's phenomenal. Her and I did that together, and our instructor literally was on the top just watching our bubbles because he obviously can't see us underwater. So he's just making sure we're doing the square patterns and the expandings and all those things. So yeah, I did navigation, those 2 ecology specialties, and then my rescue, and that got me my advanced in August of last year. And then the last one I did to get my master diver was night and limited viz, which I did at Diveland Park in Alabama. Highly recommend that training center. It's super cool because they have a whole buoyancy course you can do down there to where you literally like go in between items, and they also sink random things. So they have like a Mercedes-Benz down there that looks like you're driving it. They have a motorcycle you can sit on and like rev. They have sailboats and things, and they just put it all down there so divers can get really comfortable about going under man-made items and things like that. So that is where I got my master diver, and I did, I think, 40 plus dives last year outside of what I do day to day. So it was a lot of dives considering I don't dive for a living.
Oh, that's amazing. No. And what you're saying about the navigation, so a lot of my dive training, well, it's been a little bit more spread out now, but coming up as a diver, open water, going through, advanced, rescue, I did the master diver with SSI. At the time, it was called Dive Control Specialist, but it's basically their dive master program. But I definitely really enjoyed the navigation part of it, because if you've been to the open ocean where it's just clear blue, you're doing it's all natural navigation, right? Like you grab the compass out and you're like, oh, okay, but you could just kind of look up and see where you started, see where you need to go, as opposed to if you have less than a couple feet of visibility, you need that compass. And when I was teaching, I would always tell people that, like, hey, if you could do navigation here, like, you're gonna rock it anywhere you go, because you literally, as soon as you get 20 feet away from the platform or anything, you're not going to be able to see where you came from, so you need to really know your buoyancy, know your depth, know where you're going, follow that compass, use your tools. So no, that's such a valuable experience that you gained in that part of it, because people that do it in the ocean, it's like they don't know how good they have it. Not all oceans, obviously, but that clear blue tropical environment that we all want to be diving. Well, not everybody wants to be diving in, but mostly me.
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, I always thought when I got dive certified, I was going to be ocean only. The fact that majority of my dives, A, are freshwater, B, are in very limited visibility, I never would have thought that starting as a diver. Because when you first start, all your instructor talks about is all the cool things you can see in the ocean. They never talk about lake diving, and I've actually grown an appreciation for it. But I still love my ocean dives. I haven't done as many as I'd like to, but I have a good time either way.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about the lake that you're diving in. So is it a pretty big lake? You said it's kind of iconic. I don't really know much about it. Well, like I said, I haven't been to Georgia. So can you tell me a little bit more about the lake? So
Lake Lanier has a lot of myth things that go with it. So there's a bunch of, so in the 50s, the military actually took over this area of Georgia, and basically there used to be a town at the bottom. And what they did is they sunk the town and basically put a man-made lake on top of it. So a lot of people think the lake is haunted. So
Oh,
anytime I
wow.
tell somebody that I dive at Lake Lanier, their first question is, have you ever found a body? And have you ever seen anything crazy when you're down there? So the rumor is that the town wasn't empty when the lake was made, but that's never been confirmed. But you technically can see houses and things in the middle of it, but that's about 90 feet down. That's not where I'm going when I'm diving there. I'm doing those inlet areas, places the people are, because that's going to be where the trash is. So if I'm really making an impact, that's going to be where I need to go. But it's a pretty cool area. I really enjoy it. It actually looks very calm and serene on the surface. Some days you can go and it's like kind of choppy waves, but it just depends. But when you get down there at about 25 feet, it clears up as long as you don't have those silt kickers. I avoid other divers when I'm down there just in case, because they can ruin a dive real quick. But you do see the thermocline. You'll see that cold chill. It's super interesting considering it's in the middle of Georgia.
Oh, yeah. I'm super intrigued about this town. So Lake Travis, it's also a man-made lake, and there was no towns in there. There's a couple of structures. The thing that makes it kind of cool sometimes is you could dive to where these basically like an underground forest, so there's a lot of tall trees, and it gets kind of like, I don't want to say creepy. Creepy is not the right word, but it's something out of a horror movie, right? Like you just see this tall structure and you're diving through. It's a little silty. You can't really see. And then all of a sudden this tree comes in and now you're diving through a little mini forest. And I'm kind of intrigued about the little town. Do you know when the lake was formed?
I believed in the 1950s was when the area was emptied. And I think within
Oh,
five
okay.
years of that was when they actually had the lake fully made.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, that sounds super interesting. I need to know more. So moving forward, you're kind of on the marine biologist side. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So I am currently in a bachelor's to master's program. So I'll finish my bachelor's in May. It'll be in marine biology and sustainable aquaculture. And then I'll be finishing my master's in marine animals. So I'll be doing marine predators specifically, hoping to learn more about sharks. That's what I want my specialty to be in. But on top of what I do at the aquarium, so I work with the guest services department, so I'm very hospitality side. So my areas that I'm in charge of is those desk positions. So I actually help out a lot with our encounters. So my team's the one that checks in all of our divers that do the dive encounters or the swims or anything like that. But in addition to that, I also work for Bass Pro Shop. So I am a maintenance diver for them. So I do a lot with freshwater diving, as I've said. So I get to kind of interact with those freshwater animals a lot, see what that's like. But it is odd because I don't dive with fins. So that is a, you don't realize how difficult that is because you don't know your legs are so buoyant when you don't have fins on. So I do have weights on my ankles to keep my legs from floating up. But yeah, I do that once or twice a month, depending on what my boss needs.
So I've worked with a few commercial divers. I remember one guy in particular, and he hated diving with fins. Like his whole world with diving is like, okay, I'm down here to work. What's buoyancy? Why would I care about buoyancy? I need to be planted on the bottom. Like this is what I need to do. It's a very interesting take on it. But I mean, we all learn different, right? And there's different things to do underwater. So it's like he was super skilled and knowledgeable about like these certain things that I had no clue about, just because I'm like, okay, I just want to see the fish, that's what I'm trying to do. Well, tell me a little bit more, I guess, about if somebody comes to the aquarium, they want to do the dive, the experience. Can you tell me just kind of a little bit more about that whole side of things?
Yeah, so it's super exciting. I love that we get to interact with all sorts of people from all over the place with our dive program. And we have a few different really cool programs that we do at the aquarium. So we actually have a veterans program that if you are a veteran, especially someone with PTSD, a certain disability, ADA, anything like that, some organizations we work with allow divers to swim for free or dive for free. And it's a waitlist program. So our team checks in that as well. But in addition to that, so like if you're a regular guest, you bought a general admission ticket, you want to come in and you want to dive, we have a whole check-in process, but essentially our dive team does everything for you. It's like the VIP dive. They'll literally put your stuff on for you. So you just got to sit there and take it. And then they'll guide you when you're down there. It's about 40-ish minutes, and then they take a phenomenal video of you when you're in there. So it's just a great experience, and it's one of the few places you can say guaranteed whale sharks.
For sure. Like I said, I know a few people that have been down there, and there's quite a bit of shops that will make that trip, especially from Texas. We have a small, but well, I don't even want to call it small. There's definitely a very thriving dive scene in Texas, and we do have a lot of there is a big coast, but at the same time, it's not necessarily great diving by the coast. So, well, cool. So, a question that I would like to ask is, I know that there's some controversy, or there's two parties of people like diving in an aquarium. It shouldn't be allowed. I know, and I'll be honest too, with my experience. I remember I was kind of one-sided about it, but after speaking to more people and educating myself, I'm like, okay, well, aquariums are actually doing really good work. So they're providing a safe environment, say an endangered species that can't thrive, or they need some time to get better before they're released back into the wild. Can you kind of tell me your take on that side of things?
Of course. So yeah, you kind of spoke to it great. So I basically will speak on that a little more. Yeah, my whole career has been in aquarium industry. So both facilities that I've worked at are AZA accredited, which is something called Association of Zoos and Aquariums. It is a really, really hard accreditation to get. This means this is a top tier aquarium who's been approved by an agency that they know exactly what they're doing. They're taking care of their animals. Everything is happening according to what needs to be regulated, X, Y, and Z. So Georgia Aquarium is one of those facilities, but certain people are like, why do you have whale sharks? Why do you have these certain animals when they could be living in their natural habitat? Well, these animals are ambassador species, majority of people have never been to the ocean. Luckily, people like you and I have that ability to go diving and see these things, but most people don't. And that's one of my biggest passions with my career, is interacting with people who have never seen the ocean and giving them that passion to want to protect it, because whether or not they've seen it, it still affects their day-to-day life, even if they don't realize it. So these animals are ambassador species. They are going to be educating more people than what people can do at our coast. They're going to be giving that information. They're going to be giving that education, all of those things. If it wasn't for the aquarium industry, we would know almost nothing about whale sharks. In Atlanta, we're the reason why whale sharks have a genome mapped. They actually were able to map the entire genome of a whale shark because of the studies they were able to do on the two that we have in partnership with an aquarium in Japan. So now we can take that research and have divers go out in the Galapagos and actually know how to tag these animals, how to do blood draws, how to properly do research because of what we've been able to learn with our divers in aquarium. So there's a lot of really cool things, but I know like even in the marine science industry, there's a lot of people who are quick to judge people who work within aquariums, or are quick to be like, oh, you work with captivity, like that's a big no-no. But there is a lot of education, as you said, like once you talk to more people, you actually learn like, oh, they're doing some really cool things that wouldn't necessarily happen, because a lot of those people don't know what's going on unless it's funded. And the best way to fund it and get people to know is to have an aquarium so people can see it. So it's a super cool opportunity, and I think a lot of divers can grow an appreciation for it, especially because they get to interact with these animals. And so then when they go in the wild, they have a proper education of, I don't touch these things, I don't interact with these things, or if I'm out there and I see X, Y, and Z, this is how I can help. And I think it's a super cool opportunity that I get to have.
And I always try to keep an open mind. It's funny because, I think that I'm not going to categorize two people as I'm about to categorize two different groups of people. But as I get older, I always feel like I was really quick to jump to conclusions when I was a little bit younger. Like, oh, you're doing this is bad. And then I start to learn a little bit more about it. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not so bad, but you're still doing it. Oh, okay, this isn't so bad. Why? I just have this like single track mind, right? And as I get older, I'm like, okay, well, I know one group of people is saying this is bad. Another group of people is saying this is not as bad or it's good. Well, let's figure out more information. And that's why I always try to tell people, and that's why I love bringing people onto the podcast. It's like, okay, well, let's speak to people about what's going on. And I get to educate myself, which is always a plus, right? But and that's why I was kind of like, okay, let's just chat. So I appreciate you willing to speak about it. And then another question is, so when they're tagging the whale sharks, what's the information that they're trying to get from the species out in the wild?
So many people would think, with the sheer amount of technology we have and everything that we know, The ocean is not as explored as people assume it is. We know what the land masses look like underwater, but we don't know much about what animals live there, what's the environment like specifically. So, one of the big questions when it comes to sharks and rays are, where do they reproduce? How can we protect these species? What can we do for these species? And whale sharks specifically, along with many other species, we have no idea where they reproduce at. We have no idea where they're having their babies. We have no idea where X, Y, and Z are happening. So when we're taking these blood draws, we're trying to basically map families, and we're trying to see, okay, so this type of DNA is over here, this type of DNA is over here in the world. Are they crossing paths? Are they doing certain things where they might reproduce up here, and they're coming across the world? Like, how is that going? So we're partnering with many other aquariums, and I can't speak to too much about it, but just because I don't know all the information, but that is a little bit of a background of why we do what we do.
Okay. How far I should know the proper terminology for this. It's not migration. That's definitely the wrong. I know that's the wrong term. But as far as like the distances traveled by whale sharks, do you know how far do they travel? Like, is a whale shark in the Galapagos vacationing in Indonesia, and that, like, how far do they travel? Like, have they been able to track distances that they go?
To an extent, but the issue is like, unlike other sharks you might see on Shark Week, we can't just put a tracker on them. They have really, really strong muscular tissue, which is why when you're diving with them, you have to be so careful, because if you get whacked by a whale shark, it could be pretty dangerous. So that is something they're working on, especially learning how to tag them better, learning how to get those longer data points, stuff like that. But I mean, they can go pretty much everywhere.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. That's such a wild concept to think about. You could see one, say, in Mexico, and then, yeah, like I joke around, yeah, and they're just vacationing in Indonesia. Maybe they want to go catch some warmer waters out there too, see their cousins out there. And then, as I'm looking through your profile, you are an ambassador coordinator for Women in Ocean Science. Can you tell me a little bit more about what is going on there?
So in 2021, I discovered this program. It's an NGO, kind of. It's technically a CIS in the UK. So it is a UK-based company, and I think they are working on getting their NGO.
What's the difference between an NGO and a CIS? Is that what you said?
It's technically what type of funding they get. I don't know what it looks like overseas, but it changes depending on where you are. So in the US, we have nonprofits and you have for-profits, so it just depends on the different types that you get. They are working on getting some new funding, but I've been with them since 2021. I actually started out as a university ambassador. So basically what we do is we try to reach out to women in college, and we prefer people in the sciences, but technically if you have an interest in ocean science, you don't have to have a degree in it. We will still accept you with open arms. And we try to have at least 2 ambassadors per university, and what we do is you want you to make a club at your local university and try to get people excited about ocean science. So I started out as a university ambassador, and I was with them in that role from May of 2021 to March of 2022. And then they had a position open up. So I am the North and South American Ambassador Coordinator. So I have probably 40 to 50 girls that I connect with on a regular basis just to check in, make sure that their clubs are up and running, get them super excited, get them funding approval, things like that. But we also have a ton overseas as well. I think we represent like 18 plus countries. We have a lot of different countries that we work with, and girls all over the place. We actually have a huge group in Sri Lanka, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's as new as of 2023, our girls that are over there. But essentially we do a ton of different things, from conservation messaging to local education to dive cleanups to research, literally anything that can go into the field of marine science. And I have the pleasure of kind of supervising these girls and helping them get approved for their events, coordinating with their universities and things like that.
Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome. It's cool too that you, even though you said, like you said, they don't have a background in marine or science that you're welcoming with open. You're like, oh, you're kind of the bad cousin, but you can still come into the family.
As long as they have a passion for it and they want to get people involved with it, we're totally going to welcome you, because I actually originally started out as an education major. I thought I was going to be teaching high school environmental science. As my career, I only did a student teaching semester and decided, I don't think that's for me, and ended up in the aquarium industry. So you never know what can happen in someone's career path once they get into college.
No, well, I mean, it happens, right? I can completely understand that, where I'm like, I think I'd like to do this, and then you do it, and you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this or not. So sorry, I'm jumping all over the board here. I was gonna bring it back just a little bit to the aquarium side. So you were telling me about an accreditation that is required, or not required, but like the Georgia Aquarium has the by the agency. Can you tell me a little bit more about? I can't remember. Is it like ASA or
AZA?
AZA?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is required for that? And then if somebody's looking to go to an aquarium, how can they find out if they're qualified for that?
I think it's a great question to ask, especially since you kind of spoke to the controversies that may come with divers being within aquariums. So AZA, as I said, is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So it is a huge thing in the US. And then there's something called WAZA, which is the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So some facilities in the US can have both, but most will have just the one, which is AZA. And essentially, it is a rigorous process. You have to apply for it every 5 years. You can only apply for it once your organization has been opened up for at least 5 years, I believe. And when they come to do this, it is a huge application. So there's a lot of hands that go in. Every single department, even if it's a large aquarium or a small aquarium, is in on this accreditation. So I've gotten to go through 2 of these so far. So with my previous aquarium, I was a big part of their paperwork process. I got to set up all the educational stuff that we do, because you have to keep a record of the last 5 years. So you have to have everything, paperwork, any services you've done, all the things, like even drills. So all of this stuff has to be accounted for. And for this aquarium, Georgia Aquarium specifically, we actually did our reaccreditation back in January. Individuals coming from different facilities all around the US come and grade your facility. They do walkthroughs through every single space, nook and cranny. They do paperwork checks, and then you basically, once you get your overview, you go in front of a board, and that board pretty much tells you, this is everything you did wrong, this is everything you did right, and whether or not you got your accreditation. We do have our accreditation, so to answer your second question, how do you know if a facility has one? AZA has a full website with a full printout list on who has what accreditations, but every facility should have it posted on their door when you come in.
Okay, it's like almost like, not, I don't want to say a badge of honor, but like a badge of honor essentially.
It is a badge of honor. Okay. It's a really, really big deal.
Yeah, so it's you were saying, so there's like a peer review. So groups from other aquariums are coming in that are, I'm assuming, already accredited, and then they come in and say, hey, you could do a little bit better here. You could do. I think that's a really solid idea, because then it's not just like 1 or 2 people. It's like, no, you're getting a group of people from different areas, different specialties. No, that's actually pretty cool. So I didn't get a chance to speak to her because do you know Olivia from Fully Submerged Scuba? She's down in Florida. Do you know her? Oh, okay, yeah. So she did a takeover episode, and she spoke with, I think it's Jess Patterson from the Brevard Zoo. I think they were speaking a little bit. I don't know if you've crossed paths with her, but I think she's doing some pretty amazing work down there. Because that whole north or southeast areas, I don't want to say small, but I know the scuba diving community is pretty small, regardless of what industry you're in within the scuba diving community. So I don't know if you've crossed paths with her or been down there at all. So
yeah, I do have to say the aquarium industry is just as small. So being that I've only worked in 2 facilities, I probably could go to any other aquarium and know somebody who knows somebody that I worked with. And Olivia, I actually accidentally crossed paths with her. Her wetsuits, or I guess skin suits, that she came out with last year that have like the shark bite arms. Yeah. I bought one. I did some super cute photos in it for a pumpkin dive I was doing when I got my master diver, and she loved the photos and reposted them. So that's how we've interacted.
Oh no, she's super awesome. She's been on the podcast a couple times, and I absolutely just like love her personality. Her whole persona is so funny, and yeah, no, she's. I hope to have her back on. She does great takeover episodes. Well, cool. I'm glad to be educated more on the aquarium side of things, and to educate other people too. I know there is some, like I said, controversy is what I'll say, and it's good to get the positive information out there on what's going on rather than just sticking to one side of it and saying, oh, this is all bad. So can you tell me a little bit more about, like I said, jumping all over the board, so I apologize. That's how my mind works sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, that question seems, or that seems kind of cool. So your marine biology work that you're doing, can you tell me a little bit more about the stuff that you're studying? Like, what do you plan on doing afterwards? Just kind of tell me that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I plan on specializing in sharks and rays. However, I love conservation education. So in addition to what I do within the aquarium industry, Bass Pro Shop and things, I am very, very passionate about teaching. So I love going out to local schools and actually giving educational seminars or sessions about either the importance of coral reefs, what is recycling, how do you recycle, marine science careers, as well as like the importance of sharks. I'm really passionate about sharks. It's one of my big things. And I love doing that. I love talking about these types of things and getting people excited about learning about them. So my goals within marine science, I've kind of touched many different facets of the industry. But my biggest goal is actually to get into the NOAA Corps, so I'm hoping next year I will officially get in. I'm hoping to be a research diver, or at least on one of their vessels. So I really want to make diving a bigger part of my career and do it more often than I currently do. So we'll see what happens with that, but hopefully once I finish my bachelor's degree in May, I'll get accepted and we'll see what happens and be able to do research diving for the U.S. government.
That would be absolutely amazing. I want to say they have a facility in Texas, right? Or no? And so would you be relocating to Texas?
So they have different places all over the U.S., so that would just depend on what would happen once I go through the program if I get in. And they have 2 different tracks you can take. So there's a flight track and a maritime track, so you can either work on a ship or work on a plane. A lot of their ships either work with national marine sanctuaries, or they're doing local waterways, or they're doing fishery research, or they're charting. So it just depends on what I would get assigned to, but I'm really passionate about a lot of those different items. As I said earlier, the other half of my degree is in aquaculture, so I love fish farming. I think it's a super cool thing that people should get more involved in because it could really change the way certain things go, but we'll see what happens in the next year.
Okay. Well, wow. Now I have 2 separate directions I want to go. Can you tell me a little bit more about fish farming and it changing things?
So fish farming is something that's super cool. So aquaculture, as I said, is literally fish farming. So basically it allows for facilities, they can either do them in water or they can do them inland. So a lot of facilities can grow certain fish together. So here in Georgia, we have a few different ones that like specialize in like freshwater fish, such as trout, bass, those types of things. And what we're doing is we're growing fish naturally through us or whatever organization that happens to be doing it, and then they can be resold and feed people. And it's a really great way to be sustainable. It's a really great way to not overfish our natural populations that are in the ocean that are trying to rebuild. But there is positives and negatives with anything that you try to do to fix things to be more sustainable. So there's improper ways to aquaculture and proper ways to do it, but one of the cool things that I've gotten to research is polyculture, which is where you do more than one species together, so they kind of work together when you're doing aquaculture. So there's a bunch of really cool things that go into it. I definitely recommend wherever you're at locally, check out if you have a facility near you, because a lot of places do and they don't realize it. And maybe their fish that they're getting at the grocery store was aquacultured and actually wasn't wild caught.
Oh, okay. Overfishing is definitely a serious issue. I know, especially in this part of the world. I mean, there's definitely ships that will, I don't want to say get in trouble, but yeah, I know it's a problem. I can't speak too much about it, but definitely I know it's an issue. And I feel bad sometimes because I'm like, man, especially in the, podcasting that I'm doing, I'm like, I should know more about this. But yeah, there's a lot of information out there. So, okay, cool. No, I like the fact that it's sustainable and you can, it's a better, I don't want to say a better way to do things, but a different way to do things. As far as the NOAA program, do they only accept a certain amount of candidates? Is it really difficult to get into that program?
Yes, it is very, very difficult. It's like a 6-month interview slash application process, and they only do 2 classes a year, and I think the class maxes are between 10 and 15 people. It is
Okay.
a very, very small branch of the US government. People don't realize that it's technically a military branch. It is the 8th uniformed branch of the US military, but they're not true military. So, what they literally do is science and education and within that realm for the US government. And it's an umbrella under the Department of Commerce, not the Department of Defense, which is why it's separate from the military side to an extent. Basically, they do a ton of stuff for NOAA, the actual organization. So when NOAA vessels go out, the people who are driving those ships, manning those ships, assisting with the research and all of that, that's going to be the NOAA Corps individuals.
Oh, okay, okay. I definitely wish you the best luck, and
Thank
that'll be
you.
awesome to have you back on as after like a big expedition or something like that. So you can either go work on a boat or a plane. What type of stuff are they doing on a plane?
So from my understanding, basically what they're doing is, have you ever seen the movie Twister?
Yes, yes. There's
Okay.
I've seen the old one. There was a new one that just came out, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you talking about the new one? Or I've seen the old one. I've seen the old
Either
one.
one, as long as you
Okay,
have
okay.
an understanding of storm systems. So, NOAA Corps, as I said, has the 2 branches. So, their flight path are going to be the ones that actually fly overhead these storms, especially through hurricanes. So,
Wow.
when our huge hurricane hit down in Florida a few months ago, I think that was Helene. There is a video, and you can look it up. It's called Miss Piggy. It's one of the planes the NOAA Corps uses. Miss Piggy was actively flying through this hurricane, getting data points, similar to what they do with the science in Twister to understand the formation, what's a part of it, how quickly is it moving, things like that. And they take all that data, and that's what they give news channels to make sure people are properly educated on what to do.
Oh, wow. What's funny is I think I saw like a reel or a TikTok or something where they were in this plane, and it had to have been something. Maybe it's that video that you're saying it, but that's such a crazy thought, being in a plane in the middle of a storm. Like, what? I get a little turbulence on a commercial flight, and I'm like, dude, this is scary as all hell.
And it can be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, but I guess it's in the same sense, like being out in the middle of the ocean on a boat during some crazy storm is just as crazy to other folks, But I'm like, yeah, I would do that. No problem. But a storm in the air, no.
Yeah, no, and that's why I was like, I would stick with the dive track personally, because that's what I know, that's my realm. But there is 2 different options available. And I mean, speaking of turbulence, like I went on a dive trip earlier this year, and when I tell you the whole boat got sick, that boat ride was probably one of the worst boat rides I've ever been on. I think all of us except the dive masters leading the group and one girl did not get sick.
Just because it was such rough conditions.
Such rough waves. We were on a very small boat, what I considered to be too small for how tall the waves were, but also I don't run the company, so that's none of my business, I guess, as long as they get me there and from safely. But yeah, it was pretty bad.
Oh, man. I don't want to say I've never been seasick. There was one time, but I blame it on I was extremely hungover. I feel like bad because I don't drink as much anymore, but I was like severe. I was definitely really hungover, and I actually even called the second dive because I'm like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. But I've never been actual seasick where I go out normally, and I could only imagine how bad that must have been, especially because I'm assuming probably a lot of people on the boat, if they're going out on a boat, they're probably like, yeah, I don't get seasick, and then to get seasick.
It was very interesting because the boat was pretty choppy, but we were like, oh, it's not going to be that bad. We also ended up calling the second dive, so we never went down for the second one. We went back to shore. But to give you kind of a rundown, the boat was moving so heavy when they dropped the line that when I was trying to get on, I got smacked underneath the boat when I was holding the railing. So that's how like choppy the waves were.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
man, that seems thrilling, but also terrifying at the same time, like, right?
I told my mom, and she was like, please don't ever do that again. And I was like, I can't make any promises. I don't know what a dive boat's going to look like when I go out.
Is your mom a diver or anybody else in your family?
So, my uncle on my dad's side, it's my great uncle, is the only one that I know of that's dive certified. However, my mom did do the shark cage dive with me at the aquarium because they used the hose with a OTS mask.
Oh, okay,
So
okay, okay.
you didn't have to be certified to do it, and she loved it. So I'm hoping one day she'll actually let me take her into the water. Hopefully, maybe she'll be my first student if I ever go to instructor, because she had a great time with it.
That's awesome that you introduced her to that. It's cool to see that when one member of the family gets certified and then slowly other members of the family start doing it because they see the passion behind it and everything. So going through your dive master, and then you said eventually you want to become instructor. How do you feel about, because that's the question I always like to ask, is like people go from like and obviously you're a little bit more than just a recreational fun diver, like you're kind of doing a lot of work behind it. How do you feel about going into now, okay, I'm going to be teaching people, taking on that much more responsibility, which I think is kind of I don't want to say odd question to ask you because it seems like you have a lot of responsibility in your diving already. So it's like, how do you feel about making that transition?
I could see the hesitancy in myself doing it because I'm responsible for so many things like external of diving that I think when I do dive, I like the freeness of it. However, I had a group of friends who were like, we would really, because you're the most experienced diver in the group, we would really like for you to take us out and we kind of do a dive. And I have to say, I did not do the greatest job, but that also showed me where my strengths and weaknesses were. And that's really what pushed me to want to kind of go into my dive master because I felt so confident going into this dive. And I didn't even account in currents and how strong currents would be. So we were all underweighted. And so it was a very interesting and very short dive. But I learned a lot in the 40 minutes that we were in the water. But I really hope that as I continue through my diving career, that with Dive Master, and I think I'll probably stick with that for a little bit, maybe dive guide for a while, if I'm comfortable with it, probably just pursue my assistant instructor and then go from there. But I've been hesitant to like fully go into my dive master because of going pro. I wouldn't necessarily be leading all the time, so I would feel like I'd get out of habit to an extent just based off the type of diving that I do. But I'm excited either way, whichever way it goes.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think that's such a great outlook to stick with dive master or even just assistant instructor for a while. I feel like that's a step that's overlooked and passed very quickly with a lot of people. And I get it. So I worked as a dive master I was basically a dive master for around 2 years, which is still a short amount of time. It's all relative, right? But for me, it was a long time. And some people will go dive master immediately into instructor. And I think what is lost there as a dive master, as an assistant instructor, you have the ability to go and sit in with a lot of different instructors and build your toolkit and say, oh, I like the way that they're teaching this. I don't like the way they're teaching that. Let me find a different way to do things. And you start to actually see a lot of I don't want to say problems, but challenges that people will face when they're going through a course, right? Like, so if you walk right into an instructor position and you've never had a problem with mask clearing, you've never seen somebody have a problem with mask clearing, when you get to that first student that has a big problem with mask clearing, which a lot of people do, you won't really know how to handle it, and then you're kind of learning on the fly, but you're in this instructor position, so you're kind of supposed to be, I know everything, like I'm the leader in the group, and I don't know how to handle this situation. But if you've seen it multiple times, and you've seen it dealt with and how people handle the situation, you're like, oh, okay, you have a bigger box, a toolkit to deal with the problem, so I think that's such a great outlook that you're like, hey, let me stick with this for a little bit, because it is different. Like, I actively taught for about like 2 years, and I stopped just because I moved, and I'd really like to get back into it. But then, like, I start overthinking it, like, man, do I really want to get back into it? Because there's a lot of responsibility there. But then also, I started taking a lot of classes for myself, and I really enjoy that, being a student again, because it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to say I have less responsibility, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, you're the instructor, tell me what to do, like, I'm here to learn. Let me learn from you. So that's such a great outlook to stick to that position for a while. Plus, you have a lot of other stuff going on too, which is pretty amazing. So I'm excited to kind of see where your career and the path that it takes you.
I appreciate that because I've had good instructors and I've also had equally really bad instructors. And I think I've learned a lot about if I want to teach or be in charge of people to take away from those negative experiences that I've had to be better instructor myself or a better dive buddy or a better leader, whatever category you want to put it under. So I'm hoping that one day maybe I'll get instructor, but right now I'm not really in a push to jump through the levels. When I first started diving, I thought that was what I was going to do, but I'm glad that I did the path that I did.
I kind of say the same thing. So I hate to say, because I hate to use like such like, negative terms, right? Like, oh, I had a bad instructor or this was a bad class. Now what I usually like to say is like, oh, okay, I've just learned how I don't want to do things. That's kind of how I look at it. Like, oh, okay. Because I mean, it's what works for somebody, it's like, okay, I get that. That might not be how I want to do things, but I just learned the way not to do it, right? I hate to like categorize people like that, but I definitely have had bad instructors.
Yeah, I think one of my worst ones was when I was doing a specialty. I won't say it because people who know me will know exactly who the instructor was. But this individual basically had me go in front of them and had me teach myself and then kept trying to like make sure I lost him, but it was the most weird way of teaching in water that I had ever experienced. And I was so confused because I was like, am I just supposed to just keep going? There was just no instruction that was given, and it was so different compared to anyone else I had interacted with in the diving world and who I've taken classes from. Because anytime I do a specialty class, I try to get someone new because I'm just as good as who I work with. So I try to get different opinions, try to get different dive buddies, different organizations, that type of stuff. It was just a super odd class. I was like, I don't know if I did good or not.
Oh, that's funny. Actually, I just thought of a random question. Going into the marine biology side of things, is there anywhere particular in the world that you would like to visit as far as being able to collect information, and it's such a diverse place to learn a lot of different things? Is there like a centralized spot like that, or is it all different? I don't know if that's a dumb question or not.
Totally not a dumb question, but marine biology is so vast that it really depends on the person. I personally, the one place on my bucket list that I know for sure I want to dive is the Maldives. I think that'd be a phenomenal place to go to. Whereas for research, I'm not sure if that's the place I would want to do, because like research purposes, this is when I get really passionate about trash. I don't know what it is. I love doing cleanups. People are like, you're obsessed with garbage. I'm like, no, I'm obsessed with cleaning up the garbage. So if it's somewhere that I can do research on like how corals have died because of certain things happening with the water, if there's been garbage in that area, how the animals have been affected, things like that. So like over the summer, I had the opportunity of going down and doing Coral Palooza with Coral Restoration Foundation, and my dive buddy and I got to learn about corals, clean corals. We worked with 2 different species, and it was super cool because that was something I had never done before, because I've done everything in aquarium. So it was really neat to kind of do that at the same time, but get to see a different perspective of the marine science side.
Oh, okay. Where's Coral Palooza?
It is down in Key Largo with Coral Restoration Foundation, and they do it World Oceans Week every year, and it's technically a 7-day celebration, but they do dives 4 of those days. And you get to go down and you get to go into their coral gardens. You help them do maintenance, cleanings, tagging, and restructuring of certain pieces. And it was super cool to kind of be a part of a project much bigger than myself.
Yeah. No, that sounds amazing. I know, I can't remember. It was definitely this year. Was it May or June this year? There was like a world bleaching event, or like, did it? I think it affected Florida quite badly, didn't it?
So I think we had our 4th bleaching event this year, but 2023 was actually probably one of the worst ones that I've ever seen. And 2023, it was super cool. The Georgia Aquarium had about 40 plus dive volunteers plus people from our dive teams go down and actually move corals from 30 feet depth to 60 feet so the hot water wouldn't kill them. Because they're species they've been trying to grow for years. They're trying to repopulate. They don't want all these species just to disappear because of how hot the waters got. I'm talking, it was like a boiling bath. It was like 98, 99 degrees. And you can imagine how hot. I would have to go down with nothing on if I was going to die.
Yeah.
There's no way I could have a wetsuit on, and I prefer to have at least a skin suit. There's no way. I'd be in a tank top and shorts. There's no way.
So has it been getting worse every year? Like, well, obviously if 2023 was worse than 2024, there's positive. Maybe it was a little bit better. No?
I honestly could have been a fluke that it was worse last year. I don't really know the full science behind it, but I know that this year wasn't as bad as it was last year, but we can only see what happens from here on out. But I know that since there's been a lot of social media and light shone on it, that a lot of people are getting involved, and hopefully it brings more awareness to it.
Because I know even out here in Malaysia, there was a few spots. I mean, probably more than a few spots. I definitely I'm kind of uneducated on it, which is something I need to educate myself more. And that's why I love meeting people like you on the podcast, because then I learn a little bit more. And I'm like, you know what? I need to get better at learning and speaking more about this, especially as divers, right? We actually, like you said, go and get to see what's happening and actually put eyes on it. And it's such a big part, kind of like what you were saying earlier about the whale sharks, right? Like if you could visually see something, then it becomes, you connect with it way more, and then you actually want to do something about it. Yeah, I definitely need to learn more and devote myself more into protecting the areas which I love visiting so much. So cool. Well, one last question for you before I let you go. Somebody that wants to help, somebody that wants to get into the conservation side of things, what is the best piece of advice that you could give that person to taking that first step or continuing that journey?
So that's one big reason why I wanted to come on the podcast. I bet you don't get many people that are based inland. So I kind of wanted to talk about that you can start anywhere. It doesn't matter what you think you can do or cannot do, you can do anything, and it can help do something bigger than yourself. Especially if you're trying to get into the dive and marine science industry of the field, there's many ways you can do that without having to live at the ocean or be a marine biologist. There's ways you can volunteer. There's things that you can be a part of. I highly suggest looking into your local areas, seeing if there's organizations or community engagement. So like the cleanups that I get to do, I find that so fascinating because I'm having a direct impact on waterways that people use all the time. And that technically affects our oceans and how that helps out other people. So I think for anybody that's starting out, don't get discouraged. I think there's many different ways that you can get started in this career field, and it doesn't have to be linear. You don't have to go to school for it and then immediately get a job outside of school. There's different opportunities available everywhere. One of my big pieces of advice, especially for anybody starting out in this industry, is, as I said, don't get discouraged, because you're always going to meet somebody that's going to have more certifications than you, more experiences than you. Learn from those people, educate yourself more, and keep on going.
Danielle, I absolutely appreciate you coming on to the podcast today. This has been super educational. It's been informational. It's been absolutely wonderful to chat with you. So thank you very much for taking the time to come on to the podcast and telling us a little bit about your journey and where you look to go. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Off-gassing, a scuba podcast.